So what would happen to me if today I showed up in the afterlife, but I had the wrong idea of what heaven is like?
Well, the great news is you get to try it out. And the surprising part is it might not turn out the way you anticipated.
Nice. Okay, cool. So, hey everybody, welcome to Swedenborg in Life. My name is Curtis. We have Chuck Blair with us today, senior pastor at New Church Live, which is a Swedenborgian church. So you're in this stuff all day, just like I am. So I want to talk to you about heaven, because you choose whether or not we go to heaven, right? Being a pastor. So I want to know what it's going to be like to get there. Everyone who's tuning in, what we're going over today, like the reason we have the audacity to say, here's what happens when you go to heaven. This is from an eyewitness account. This is out of Emanuel Swedenborg's writing, the most significant spiritual experience in recorded history.
Yeah.
I mean, like who's number two? I mean, okay, you can argue like John on the Isle of Patmos, but this is there's a content like crazy in here, and he gives you this. Here's exactly what happens.
Yeah.
This is from a story one day where a bunch of people were in heaven, had recently died. They're in the afterlife, and they're talking about, well, this is what I think heaven is, and you get to see this play out. So,
yeah, and it's kind of fun. One of the things I was thinking about, Curtis, as in heaven, so upon the earth, is you look at his spiritual experiences. They ring true because they're very similar to what we get to experience in our lives as well. We get to try out different heavens, what we consider heavenly, and some of them are going to work and some of them aren't. And it's all about this great learning experience. Like even with what we're going to look at, I love that he talks about angels coming, good spirits coming from north, south, east, and west. That's so much the way the writings are put into place. You have four different perspectives, and here they are all sharing. And the answer is always, the angel from the east always is the right answer. but they all have these different answers, and that's how we get at what is true.
That too, like, because people who, let's say, are first time watching this show, and they're just like, what are you even talking about? Why would this is so far-fetched. This is Swedenborg, this guy you don't know. He's got a weird-sounding name. A long time ago, just wrote down the idea that he has these spiritual experiences. You don't know if he did or not. But what you said there, that the way that the reason why we're sitting here hanging around this stuff for as long as we had, it's not like there's a huge wide world of people that are like, go learn Swedenborg, is because the world that he describes matches the world, particularly the inner world of us here. Yeah. Like you see it in yourself. It seems like, oh, this is how it works. Maybe this is how an afterlife works. Yeah.
It's interesting. One of the things I've been thinking about a lot is, from a Swedenborgian perspective, we don't earn heaven, we practice it. So, and it's not, Maya Angelou famously said, saving heaven for our far off days shows a lack of gratitude. I mean, I love that quote, that it's not a heaven that's way out there. It's a heaven, as Jesus said, it's the kingdom of heaven is within. That's where it is. And so we want to practice heaven like here and now. We want to literally try to live heaven now. And the descriptions he has, they're very believable because of the themes that are underneath them. And those themes ring very true.
Totally. So go practice heaven. How do you practice? You have to know what it is.
Right.
So this is from his book, True Christianity. And he's telling the story of when a bunch of people got asked that same question. He says, on one occasion, I saw an angel flying below the eastern heaven. He had a trumpet in his hand and held it to his mouth, sounding, and here's all these directions you're talking about, sounding to the north, to the west, and to the south. He had a mantle that was flowing behind him as he flew, and was wearing a belt studded with rubies and sapphires that radiated a flame-colored light. Okay, so for another day, all those details, according to Swedenborg, have like psychological significance. Right. So it's describing the state of life, of mind and heart of that angel. We're not even going to talk about that today. His body was facing the ground as he flew, parallel to it. He landed softly on the ground not far from where I was. I have been sent, the angel said, to summon, who's coming to the party? The most famous scholars, the best researchers, and the most distinguished thinkers from the nations of the Christian world that are on this continent to meet on this hill where you are currently standing. They are to express their minds freely on the following question. When they were in the world, what had they thought and understood, and what wisdom had they gained concerning heavenly joy and eternal happiness? So it's a conference. We're going. It's conference. It's like or it's sort of mixed a conference and a survey mixed together. Let's get all the people who would like people like you who say they know about what's going on, and let's see what they think.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting when I was reading through this, Curtis. There's echoes here, if you're familiar with the New Testament, to Mars Hill, the famous one where Paul gathers all these people and he goes to talk to them, and it's this famous hill that has all these different perspectives on it, all this place where they would come to debate these kinds of things. And it has that feel to it. And I love the line, like, express your minds freely. I mean, that's so much what the spiritual life is about. Like, we're given freedom. I mean, that is our gift. And God wants us to freely express, the as of self.
Yeah.
And through that expressing and listening, through that knowledge in the round, that's where we come to truth.
It's interesting because sometimes on YouTube, people who are critical of religion, and off YouTube as well, people who are anti-theists or atheists, they will call themselves free thinkers. Because historically, and you got to hand it to them, historically, religion has at least had the perception of stifling dissenting thought.
Right.
And because there's the true theology and deviating from that is a threat to it. It's just fascinating that even at Mars Hill, like you're talking about, but also here in heaven, the MO of like how you'd think this angel is going to come and just everyone gather around. I'll tell you how it is.
Right.
I'm going to tell you how it is. I already know I'm an angel.
Yeah.
So, but the method is, all right, everyone, let's hear what you have to say. That's fascinating, and that does line up with nothing becomes a part of you that you don't love. And you don't love anything that you haven't gotten into yourself in freedom.
Yeah.
So the only gateway from God to you is freedom. So everything, the actual culture that God promotes and creates is like freedom of thought, freedom of discussion.
And you think, right? Because like you flip that into freedom and joy. Can you have joy without freedom? And you can't, because your joy is going to be different than my joy. I mean, Swedenborg talks about sort of true north, like a compass versus a road map. Like the compass is always the same. It's always pointed the same direction, but our road maps are so different, and our road maps to joy are totally different. But again, like we have a true north that we can keep coming back to, and he talks a lot about that coming from that perspective.
Think if I was given the task of design the best day, the most fun day for the entire human race, where everyone's going to do what you lay out here. Like you can say, this is what you do at 7, this is what you do at 9, this is what you do at 10. Everyone's going to go do that. For almost everybody, they would be miserable doing what I say. There's no purpose because everyone's different.
Because everyone's different. I think about my granddaughter, Lumi, and if you ask her what her best day would be, dressing up like a princess. I mean, obviously. Yeah. But that's, dressing up as a Disney princess.
For public safety.
For public safety, right. Yeah. Right? Not something I plan to do today.
So here's what they went through, here's what they said. So there's these 6 groups of spirits that come, 2 from the north, 2 from the west, 2 from the south. In the spiritual world, all those are symbolic of you're in the south because you have a certain way of seeing life and loving things. Same thing with east and north and west and everything. There was also, going back to true Christianity, he says there was also a 7th group to the east, but the other groups did not see it because the light was in their eyes. East is a good direction. If you're this is why there's so many the sun rises in the east in the physical world, people would align their temples to face the east where the sun rises, because there's this correspondence there. So Angel asks all these people to discuss it's like in a conference or a workshop where you have your little group, you all go and discuss, and then there's no time to hear everyone, so you select somebody who wants to be the leader of the group, and nobody wants to, but then somebody does, and then they report back.
Yeah.
That's what's happening here. So this person from each little group reports back, here's what my group said. And not only do they get to say it, the people in that group get to go live that heaven. Like, you think that's heaven? Here you go. Yeah. So there's stakes here. So then it says, the 7th group, which was not seen by the others because the light was in the others' eyes, was from the eastern part of heaven. They said to the angel with the trumpet, as you know, all the people who have had a desire to go to heaven and have formed any particular conception of the joys heaven has in store for them are brought after they die to experience the joys they have been picturing. As they have explored the nature of their joys and have experienced that their concepts of joy were based on empty ideas and insane fantasies, they are brought up out of those concepts and taught better ones. This is what happens in the world of spirits for most people who have meditated on heaven during their life on earth and who have come to some conclusion about the joys of heaven to the point where they desire to experience them.
Yeah, I thought, reading through that, I thought one of the really interesting parts to it is this idea that our concept of heaven and our concept of joy, like they're linked.
What's the difference?
Yeah,
heaven is just where there's a lot of joy. Right?
Yeah,
You get a lot,
I think a lot of it is when we put heaven, when we sort of detach heaven from our lives as a place that's out there, then and there, not here and now. And so much of this connection with joy is coming back to saying, no, it's a here and now thing. And even looking at our language, right? Our language where we'll say, oh, that's heavenly. We use that
chocolate
language.
Ice cream is
heavenly.
It's divine.
Divine. Yeah. It's divine. And even language around when somebody's in a good mood and we notice like, oh, they're in really good spirits.
Yes, that's right.
That's a fascinating phrase right there. And that idea that I think it's to bring joy really close, because where your heart is, there will your treasure be. Where your treasure is, there where your heart will be. That the two go together very closely.
I think people could today, watching this show, could say like nobody sits around and thinks about what heaven is going to be like. Some people do, but it's certainly less in vogue than in the 1750s when Swedenborg was writing this, and everybody was thinking more about theological things for better or for worse. But when you understand that the question of what is heaven is the question of what do you think the best possible life you could have is?
Yeah.
What is the ultimate joy? What's the good life? Everybody thinks about that. Everyone has something of like, this is what if I won the lottery, this is what I do. Or just that winning the lottery would be heaven. So this is the question. What's your joy? And like, look at how, if you go into heaven and you have the wrong idea of what joy is, what happens? You get to express that. You get to go and try it out yourself, because you're never going to believe. It was Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey, he's recently kind of had this phase. He's like, I remember growing up and Jim Carrey was like, did everything awesome. Like Liar, Liar, The Truman Show, all these incredible movies that were great and so he's had all this success. And he had this quote recently where he said, like, I wish that everybody could go get everything that they wanted, so that they would understand that it means nothing.
Right.
And I think that what he's saying is everybody wants to be famous and rich. And I think you cannot, if I sit here and tell you like, that won't make you happy. That won't make you happy. Just loving your family. I don't believe you. They will not believe you. But Jim Carrey, who got to not just be famous and rich, but talented and honored and all that, I think he hit a point where he realized this is not like I thought it would be. Yeah. This is not filling the hole or whatever. So everybody in this story is going to get a version of that. Instead of an angel or Jesus is going to tell you that's wrong, you check it out. You let me know, because that's the only way you're really going to believe it.
Yeah. I was thinking, taking a look at some other passages that Swedenborg offers on joy. One of the ones he says is joy is not a matter of altitude. And I love that idea, right? That we think joy as being altitude, like these peak experiences, especially going into like the Christmas season. The joy will be this peak experience, this peak experience, this peak experience, this peak experience. But can we find it in the mundane? Can we find it in the ordinary? Because if we can find it in the ordinary, we're going to find it everywhere. We will even find it in those altitude experiences. But we'll sort of have a base note of joy in our life because we're living heaven now.
There's a very, can we find it in the ordinary? Yeah. There's a very particular ordinary that you do find it in according to these angels. So let's look at this first group. We're going to look at 4 of them. There was 7 altogether. Anyone can go and download this book for free from Swedenborg.com and read the rest. But the first group was one who thought heavenly happiness it's called feasts and celebrations, but really would be hedonism. This is sensory, like the greatest of all the indulgence stuff. So this is what they say. Surely the height of heavenly joy and eternal happiness consists in dining with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Maybe that was more popular of a conception back then. Right now, I'm like, there's other people I'd invite. However, look what that dining is like. At their tables, there will be the finest and most sumptuous foods and excellent vintage wine. Well, that's a good year. After the meal, there will be games, and young men and women dancing together to the sound of musicians or various instruments, a break now and then for us to hear the singing of incredibly sweet songs. When the evening comes, there will be stage plays. The next day, there will be yet another great feast, and it will continue like this every day to eternity. So it's like I'm in New York City and I can spend all the money I want and just I have no job. I just like go and do this. Of course, that's going to be the best thing.
Yeah.
That's what we would do if we could just do anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was interesting this morning. I was reflecting on, when we get a chance, which Swedenborg will go into, like we get a chance to experience these things. And I was listening to Father Richard Rohr, who's a Franciscan, and he was talking on a podcast about flying back from Orlando. And the flight was just a disaster. It was loud. It was noisy. The kids all over the place.
Yeah.
And he asked the stewardess, he said, well, this flight's a little raucous. And she said, oh, yeah, this flight has more registered complaints for American or United, I forget what airline it was, than any other flight. So he asked why. And he said, well, these kids had a whole week at Disney getting everything they wanted. And now they get told, no, you have to sit in the seat beside mom and dad.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it's not so fun anymore. And that idea that when we really get what we want, it doesn't create a lasting form of happiness. It just creates this insatiable want. But then when we want it and when we finally have it, that want goes, it just is a crazy place to be that can become its own cycle.
Yeah, there's a complexity. There's a little more complexity to the human psyche.
Yeah.
What is it that we're looking for? So these people, they have that idea, and then they get their week at Disneyland. So this is their experience.
Yeah.
The angel led them through a wooded area to a clearing with a large, low platform of wooden boards that had tables on it. Not long afterward, the tables were loaded with dishes of food, and little pyramids with desserts were neatly placed in the spaces between the dishes. After a brief delay, they saw their honorable dinner companions entering in a procession, beginning with Abram and ending with the last of the apostles, who are actually actors. But I think to these people, they think it's real.
Yeah.
So heaven is like, all right, the only way to get you out of this trap of thinking is we're going to make you feel like you really got the thing. You can't say, well, yeah, you gave me a great dinner, but these celebrities weren't there. So they all ate and they drank together with a joyful yet reverent state of mind. After the meal was over, the famous figures left. Then there were games to play and young men and women giving a dance performance, and afterwards several stage plays. At the end of the evening, all were invited to another festival the next day. Later, they came upon 50 people here and 50 there who had crammed their stomachs full of food to the point of nausea and were longing for their usual routine at home. Some for their professional duties, some for their businesses, some for the work they did with their hands. Many of them, though, had been detained by the guards of that wooded area and questioned about which day of feasting they were on, whether they had eaten with Peter or Paul yet. They were told that leaving before doing so was highly improper and would cause them great shame. Many of the people said to the guards in response, "We are fed up with our joys. We can't even taste the food or drink anymore. Our sense of taste is burned out. Our stomach can't take it anymore. We can no longer stand to put anything in our mouths. This ridiculous indulgence has gone on for whole days and nights on end. Please, we beg you, let us go." They were allowed out and ran home breathlessly.
Yeah, as I was reading that, I thought it's a little different way of going at it, but it's the same message as It's a Wonderful Life, right?
Uh-huh.
The beautiful movie. It all comes back to what is our life here today? Like, how do we find joy in those ordinary parts? And so much of it, and this is a little bit of a tangent, but so much of it is can we work at finding joy in witnessing life as it is versus all these activities? It's easy to think activity, but what if we could just get to the point, Curtis, where it's just about witnessing, just seeing the beauty of our regular lives, like the beauty we get to have a job and get to have interactions, the beauty that we get to have loving relationships, the beauty that we have families and communities where we can live and speak and feel cared for and feel held. All those things are very ordinary. There's nothing extraordinary there. But I think that's so much of the kind of places where we find true joy.
It would have to be that. So what's the point of existence? Why does reality exist? According to Swedenborg, the Lord's divine providence has for its purpose a heaven from the human race. Yeah. So in heaven is the same thing as happiness. So why does anything exist? So that people can be happy. If then the means to being truly happy were just found in these little extreme pockets of existence. Like if you think of all the people who have ever lived in the world, how many have had just permanent access to feasting and all this stuff? And that's all that they did. That's not the. So if that's where the joy was, that's a really bad distribution mechanism.
Yeah.
But if there's actually some kind of joy that's available why are so many people in regular life? There's got to be that there's something of heaven there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is let's read what they learned, but there's a point that I really want to, because it seems like almost like cruel. Like I get it, you had this idea of heaven. This is not really how heaven is, but why do they keep them there longer? They keep them there longer than they need to be there. You mentioned A Wonderful Life. I would say Christmas Carol, Muppet Christmas Carol. Right. Well, is like the Ghost of Christmas Present is like, Scrooge's heart is starting to warm up, and he's like, maybe I do understand Christmas. Maybe I'm starting to turn good. Maybe I do care for my fellow man. And then he goes and sees that Tiny Tim is going to die, and the Ghost of Christmas Present, who's this nice sort of ghost, is like, well, if he's going to die, he'd better do it. Decrease the surplus population. And he's quoting Scrooge back to him, just like twisting this knife in his heart.
Yeah.
But you get it in the movie. It's like, no, he's got to really hit bottom on that. Yeah. He's got to see how detestable his previous life was. I think that's because that's the only way you get free of it. Like that's why they talk about in addiction, like the beginning of recovery, it's like you hit bottom. Yeah. It's got to get to a point where I can't do this anymore. Yeah,
as you were saying that, one of the things you think about from a Christian New Church perspective is the idea of trajectory, right? That's what we're trying to do, and it's hard. It's hard to change the trajectory of our lives. It's easy to have a momentary thing, but the idea of just these slight shifts, and if I feel like so much of what the Lord's trying to do is just try to adjust our lives just 2 or 3 degrees.
Yeah.
Right. And you just do it 2 or 3 degrees differently.
Yeah.
But then you take that over eternity. It's like if you were on an airplane and you shifted the course correct by 2 or 3 degrees, you're going to end up in a whole different country than you would have ended up with.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it's not like heaven is not a static state. It's not like we get there and here's this box and this box is heaven and then we get to live in this box. No, it's we're growing through all eternity, and there's nothing that's growing in terms of banquets, in terms of, it's the hedonistic treadmill thing.
Okay, that's right. Nothing's growing there. So people know this didn't work. What does work? Yeah. That's what we're about to find out. Yeah. How do you, and are you not allowed to ever eat in heaven? What's the what do we learn? What's the conclusion? Where's this going? What's the twist? This is from True Christianity 7:35. The angel taught them the following things about heaven. So now they get a chance to learn. Now they're listening because they were divested of their old ideas. He said, in heaven, as on earth, there is food and drink. There are dinners and parties, and the tables of leading figures are laden with glorious spreads, including special delicacies you don't find elsewhere, like the hot Cheetos. These things rejuvenate and refresh the mind. There are also sports and shows and concerts of vocal and instrumental music, all at the height of perfection. All these things are a joy to the angels, but they don't constitute their true happiness. Their happiness has to be present for these things to bring them joy. The happiness that is present with them during the joyful events is what makes the events joyful, enriches them, and keeps them from being meaningless and tedious. And the only source of anyone's true happiness is doing something useful through his or her work.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Oh, that's just, I love that imagery of that, and because just imagine, right? You get 2 people at a sumptuous banquet, at an amazing meal. Yeah. One person's had the worst day of work ever. The relationships are failing. Yeah. Their life is upside down. They're going to experience that meal very differently than somebody who's coming at it with a true sense of happiness and a true groundedness, because that piece, there's like it's where just like breathing, just taking a breath and coming into the happiness of life. And one author really talked about, come at it where joy is the starting point. Why is joy the starting point? Well, because from a Christian New Church perspective, life is good. Like God is good.
Mm-hmm.
There's no force per se that's out there. You know, divine providence always pulling us towards what's good, and it's the same with these passages. It's about pulling us towards what's good. There's no force that's the exact opposite that's going to work to do the opposite of all those things.
And look at what it says. Like what is the thing that fills that joy in is being useful.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know if I've found this anywhere else. It's not like I'm extremely well read in spiritual stuff. I try to do a little here and there, but I don't know if there's any other religious or spiritual tradition that I've heard the core of a joyful human life is to be useful.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's where your happiness, that's where the satisfaction comes from, is doing something useful in your life. It says here through his or her work, it's not being useful like, okay, I went and volunteered this month. It's what are you doing, whether you're a parent or whether you're going into a factory or what are you doing? How are you impacting the world and taking joy and satisfaction from serving something greater than you through a particular task? That's the happiness. And if you don't have that happiness, if that's what runs you day to day, then you can go to some great dinner and it feels great. If you don't have that, everything starts to collapse in on itself.
Yeah, I was thinking too. You know, just for people might want a hack. Like, what's a quick hack? Like, how do I get to this?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking a dinner party. How do you get to it at a dinner party? How do I come to love the use in a dinner party? Like, this is sort of heady things, and I'm at meal. What does that mean? And just be curious. You know, I love the quote. We walk into a room, wonder if we belong. Jesus walks into a room, loves what he finds there. Mm-hmm. You know, and I think that idea of coming at a dinner conversation with simple curiosity, like thinking, okay, so maybe the Lord put this person right beside me, and maybe I'm supposed to have a conversation with them, and not to tell them something or to from on high have edicts, but just the exact same spirit of all this, just the spirit of discovery. Yeah. The spirit of curiosity, bringing that. And you can be really useful to people simply by asking them questions about how their day is, who's on their heart, what's the best part. One question I love is, what's the best part of your life right now? People have great answers to that. And that's a way to be useful.
And that's a different framing of what it is to be at a social thing. I guess I'm more of like an introvert. I don't, if it's like, oh, we have to go out and do this, I'm not like, hooray. Okay. Okay, great. However, what you're framing it as is like, imagine there's use in that, because it's a world in which divine providence is running everything, and if everyone's seated there, but God is sitting there like, I'm going to put you next to this person so you can impact it, because he's looking for the use in it.
Yeah.
And that, to me, I feel comfortable, and I know what I'm doing when I can be useful.
Yeah,
like
right,
that.
right.
Like, okay, I get why I'm here. I can do this. I don't know if I can make these people laugh or talk about it, but I can. If this person, I can do something for them. Like, I get that.
Yeah,
I can be into that. So let's keep going here, because the angel gives a little more about the nature of usefulness as heavenly happiness. Yeah. He says, hidden deep within the desires of every angel's heart. Angel, according to Swedenborg, being just a person who is living in heaven. So that's you and me. There is a kind of current that draws her or his mind to do something. In that activity, the mind finds its peace and satisfaction. This peace and satisfaction then condition the mind to be receptive to the love of being useful that flows in from the Lord. Receiving this love leads to the true heavenly happiness that gives life to the joys that I mentioned a moment ago. At the level of its essence, heavenly food is in fact love, wisdom, and usefulness working together. Or to put it another way, usefulness that draws on wisdom and comes from love. So you need it.
Yeah.
That's a deep secret of what it is. Everyone's trying to figure themselves out. It's like, how do I be happy? How do I discover my truth? How do I find the life I want? Just so you know, there is a deep, unending current within you, which is a drive to do something helpful.
Yeah. And it was thinking of it with meals, you know, being a pastor, we do a lot of service at different places. Ronald McDonald House, we're cooked down there. We have in the past. And then one we do a lot with is St. Francis Inn down in Kensington section of Philadelphia. We do a lot of meals down there. And isn't it interesting too, Curtis, like the shift from like, if somebody said, Chuck, you have to take me a place where 100% guarantee I'm going to feel joy and I'm going to feel happy, I would not take them to the fanciest restaurant I'd ever gone to. I would take them to St. Francis Inn and watch their joy in cooking and serving for other people.
Yeah.
100. No one has ever come out of that being like, well, the soup was a little lukewarm. Never. We just don't, because right, that's from a Swedenborgian perspective. That's what we were created to do. And literally, like, you want to practice heaven, you want to live heaven now, that's how you can do it. And it doesn't mean we do it 5 days a week. I mean, we do it maybe 3 times a year, but that's enough to remind us of what really matters in the end. And it's that deep joy that we can feel from that expression of love.
Well, what was Jesus doing? Like, what was Jesus up to?
Yeah.
Wasn't he, I don't know, he was helping people. He was like, I'm going to heal you of this thing. I'm going to, you guys, you need wine? All right, I'll make wine, right. Make the water into wine. It's some preaching, but that was like, that was what he was into doing. Yeah. So there's got to be something to it.
There's got to be something to it. Well, and that whole idea of table fellowship, right? Like that the last big event for him is sitting around the table, bread and wine. Just that simple idea of sharing a meal, not the fanciest meal of all time, none of that, but it was about the people. And the idea of table fellowship, it's the concern, I think from God's point in here, I'm borrowing some words from another pastor. It's not that I think the Lord's worried we'll forget it's holy. I think he's worried we'll forget it's ordinary. Because it's that bread and wine. Like, why would he choose that? Why wouldn't he choose one of these big sumptuous feasts, like the feast end all feasts? Yeah. But he didn't. He chose bread and wine. Just that simple. Pizza and beer would be another way to maybe look at it.
So something simple and accessible that anyone can get. And that's what usefulness is. Yeah. The Lord has snuck heaven into this, something that you can always do anytime, all the time, no matter who you are, which is to do what's good. Yeah. Yeah. To do what's good. That's where heaven is.
Yeah. Well, I just really want to just pause to say how important that point is. Yeah. Right. It's not this epic search. It's not climbing a mountain in Tibet, though if you want to climb a mountain in Tibet, knock yourself out, right? Yeah. It really is these ordinary things where heaven becomes totally accessible. And we know that in our lives. We know that very deeply, but we live in a culture that can get us off track.
That needs to be, that's Main Street. If you go climb the mountain in Tibet, that's great. You do it if it's something to enliven and refresh your ability to go and do your usefulness, which is something anyone can do. So that deals with the broad category of, I would say hedonism, right? Or just sort of the best things in life, like that, and no, nothing to interrupt that. But then I think there's another category of what do people think will make them happy. And that is like the power or the preeminence. If you sum it up, I would be really happy if I was greater than everyone else. And not a lot of people will say that out loud, but definitely that's a motivating force for all of us. Yeah. We're constantly trying to in little ways be better than other people. And we think the more that we get that, the happier we are. So that's what this next group said the quiet part out loud. So the idea that heavenly happiness is living like a royalty. Like if I was a king, then I'd be happy, which is the same thing as saying I'd be in heaven. This is what it says in True Christianity 7:32. Surely heavenly joys and eternal happiness consist in the possession of great power and tremendous wealth. This is that second group. This is their leader saying that. And the more than regal magnificence and shining splendor that come with them. I think today you'd say if I'm famous and powerful, these are the source of the joys of heaven and of our ongoing enjoyment of them, which is eternal happiness. As we have noticed from observing people in our former world, that means the world where we live here, who have such power and wealth. We have also gathered from statements in the Word that those who are happy in heaven are going to reign with the Lord and will be kings and princes. So you're looking at, I look in the world, who seems to be on top? These the elites. They're there, they're doing awesome. Heaven is, you get to feel that. Yeah. You get to be splendid, powerful, magnificent. they say like we're like kings or queen. Like, those aren't really in style anymore, but you can insert the modern day equivalent of that. Let's see how it goes. I mean, actually, like, how could that not be heaven? Like, I would do that. So this is continuing on. The angel took them into a portico with pillars and obelisks. At the front of it, there was a low entryway that led into the portico itself. Suddenly, an actor who was pretending to be an angel appeared to them and said, and I think the group doesn't realize it's an actor, "This portico is the entrance to heaven itself. Stay here for a while and prepare yourselves, because the older among you are going to become kings, and the younger are going to become princes." Well, man, we made it. After that, the actor said, next to each pillar, after the actor said that, next to each pillar a throne appeared. A mantle of silk was laid out on it, and a scepter and crown were sitting on top of the mantle. Next to each obelisk, a seat appeared that was raised about 4.5 feet off the ground. That's a pretty good throne.
That's a pretty good throne.
How are you going to get up there? On the seat, there was a gold chain and a sash of the order of the knighthood, which was gathered and held at each end by a ring of diamonds. So here it'd be like, oh, you're sitting there. I don't even know what luxury, but like you're sitting there and like, oh, there's a Rolex that's here, and there's a Ferrari F9 million, whatever that car, like all those things are sitting there waiting for you, and you have like you CEO of something, like all the trappings of power are sitting right there. Then the supposed angel cried out, "Go now and put on this finery, then take your seats and wait." They put on their royal trappings and sat down. A dense fog rose up from below. As they breathed it in, their heads began to swell, and they straightened up on their thrones and seats and came to fully believe that they were now kings and princes. The fog was the aura of the fantasy that now inspired them. And they waited and waited until their spirits were exhausted and worn out by desire. So in this simulation, they okay, we're going to get you enough of the trappings that you feel like you really are a king. We're going to get you into that emotion, and go ahead, stay there, see how long that feels good for.
Yeah. Well, it's such a fascinating, set of passages there, because when we started out, we were talking about how, oh yeah, we get to do this in this life. Here he's talking about things that happen in the other life, but this is exactly with the disciples was the same thing. There's this beautiful scene where they're arguing who gets to sit on the right hand of God, who's number one. They're trying to get a pecking order. And Jesus is like,
yeah,
dude, like, dude,
bro.
like, yeah, right. And he picks up a little child and he goes, this is the kingdom of God. Like, you have to become like a little child, and that's that innocence and that willingness to listen and that curiosity. And it's a very, very, very different perspective on it.
It is. Jesus was actually like a pretty remarkable thing.
Yeah.
And I think we take it for granted because you have a world that's been shaped so heavily by the stories of Jesus and the teaching of Jesus. But so you take for granted things like, oh yeah, a little child is like God. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But that's not how it was. That's not how Jupiter, Zeus is not like that.
No.
People's conception of God prior to that, a lot of it was exactly that.
Yeah.
It was, this is the peak of the peak. That's how God is. And that's got to be what the greatest life is and the greatest happiness. That would be a bad model again if you were right. If you were God and and the point is to have people in the joy of heaven, but the joy of heaven is reserved for just like something that by definition only a tiny fraction of people can experience, because if you start letting 30% of people be kings, that waters it down. There's not that many people to command. It's not that special. There's so that's not only would it not be a good way to make the human race, but also it is not what Jesus did.
Yeah.
That's not what his life was like. He didn't have a throne. He didn't even have a kingdom. He had 12 followers, voluntary, and one of them, he ditched him, and all of them ditched him. He did not have that lifestyle. So you got to stop for a second and be like, well, why? If it really is the point of human life is to better yourself and rise to the apex, and there's plenty of, there's go on YouTube Shorts, like everybody's talking about like this is how you hustle and this is how you, if that's what happiness is, why didn't Jesus go and do that? What's he doing fiddling around with stuff that's not the point of life then.
Yeah.
Why is he saying that a little child, you become like a little child can't do nothing.
Yeah.
It doesn't know how to rule anybody. It has very few side hustles. What's this? That's new information that, you know how it says the light shined in the darkness and the darkness didn't comprehend it? That darkness is you. That's your ego, which does not comprehend this. It is like, okay, you hear about Jesus, go to church. Okay, well, that's fine. But I know that being better than people is happiness. I know that that's what it is. So you can say, okay, I don't know what you're talking about over there, but it's nice. I'll pay lip service to it. But if God is actually saying, no, to be innocent and humble is heaven, and then what they're learning here is that to serve, to be useful is heaven. That's different. That's different than what you'd think it would be. Hey, this is Curtis from the show that you're watching right now. This show is brought to you by the not-for-profit Swedenborg Foundation. If you want to support us in our mission to get a broad conversation going around the works of Emanuel Swedenborg, click the link in the description, make a donation. That is what makes it so we can do what we do. Thank you so much for your support.
Well, it's interesting too, because you think about parts of our life. Like, of course, there's a part of us that really believes that more money and more power, power, prestige, possession, the big three, right?
Yeah.
That really believes that if I have that, and that I will be more happy. And there's part of me, and to be honest, there's part of me that will always believe it. But that's
right.
my old will, right?
That's right.
That's not the part that I want to listen to. It's not about like, oh, I can't believe I'm thinking this. Of course you're thinking that. You live in our culture. Of course you're going to think that.
Yeah.
It's about coming back to these first things recognizably first. And one of the ones, Curtis, I was thinking about as you're reading through this, that fascinates me about Swedenborg's perspective of heaven. He talks about the simple good a lot.
Yeah.
That the people who just simple good, simple. It doesn't mean dumb. It doesn't mean simpleton. It just means first things recognizably first. They live really basic good lives. They navigate by a few things, and they're not trying to make life really complicated.
Yeah.
And they're just really good people. And I think, who do I want to be around? Like, those are the people I want to be around.
Yes.
I want to be around those people who just, they've got something, and it's just a core basic goodness. It's not a lot of drama. It's just this core basic goodness that is so enjoyable and so refreshing to be around.
That's something you can cultivate inside yourself, regardless
Right.
of if you have some kind of fancy job,
Right.
or you're somebody that has a lot of responsibility or wealth or something. That's something. What we're saying right now is heresy to the ego.
Yeah.
So I think I have to explain it in a way that if I was watching, I would say, okay, that seems plausible. You're not just saying platitudes. So I think what the lesson is in the first story that we read, the angel was saying, look, stuff like good meals and fancy things, that's fine. That can be part of heaven, but it's not the core of heaven. And if you don't have the core of heaven, that stuff will not stay pleasant to you.
Right.
So what I'm saying is, there's plenty of people to whom you can get heaven inside you, and then you need to be able to go and have resources and have position. You need to go do things, or you can continue to strive to. I'm going to try to increase how much money I have because I need it, because I need to have a good house for my family, or I want to have more resources than that because I think then I can go and affect things here, or I want to move up the ladder in this company because I want to then make this company do good things. So for some. But you don't know where God needs to put you.
Yeah.
And so just know that there's plenty of people who have what your ego is looking for and are miserable. Think about how many like famous musicians have killed themselves.
Yeah.
And to me, when I was little, that is the peak of human existence and glory, was to be a rock star.
Yeah.
Like that you got all this fame, all this money, all this acclaim, and you're doing it for this thing that people love so much. So many people were in that position, and we're not just miserable, but like so miserable that they're like, I'm just going to end it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that I'm not saying that it can't do good things for you, but it's not a panacea. It's not a silver bullet.
It's not a silver bullet.
Unless you have the heaven inside you. And there's plenty of people that don't have any of that stuff and yet are much happier.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm just saying to the ego, I'm not saying you're not allowed to go and try to get the things that you want, but those things have to be secondary and in service of this love of usefulness, love of the human race. Otherwise, you can go do it, but you're not going to find what you're looking for.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I love the idea of immediate goods, right? That it's immediate good. It's not immediate, it's mediate. It just helps. It's a bridge that helps you to get from one point to another. So you have resources because you feel like you want to help more people. I mean, or you want to create a business that can serve in certain ways. It can be useful to the world in certain ways. And a lot of those businesses, I mean, the really what's amazing to me too is a lot of those businesses end up being really successful because they're putting the customer first, because they're really trying to help other people with filling a particular need. And that really works. Like my parents, it was about the least glamorous, least sexy business of all time. I always wanted them to have a trucking company, but instead they had a nursing home. That was the family business. And for my parents, anybody who lived there was called a guest. And that was just so baked in that these were our guests. These were our guests at this nursing home. And that's how they were treated. And so my parents ran a business that had some success, but it had success at a level where it wasn't necessarily always monetary. Sometimes it was, sometimes it wasn't. But it was successful because it made a difference. They were really out there to make a difference in the world.
So this is what they learned. This is going back to this group. They sat there. They felt like they were kings. Felt like they were ruling everyone. Finally, they got exhausted and worn out, and realized, you can't sustain that. That first rush of I'm powerful. It does not last. And then it goes on. After 3 hours, heaven opened above their heads, and angels looked down and felt sorry for them. The angels said, "You need to learn what kings and princes mean, and what reigning with Christ means." They mean becoming wise and performing a useful function. Christ's kingdom, which is heaven, is a kingdom of useful functions. The Lord loves everyone and wants us all to have what is good. What is good is being useful. Man, sometimes I feel like Swedenborg just hits you with too many, like this. That's E equals MC squared, E equals MC squared, like those are all like major laws of existence. So these are people who have heard, like this is just like the disciples, like you're saying. Which of us are going to reign with you in heaven? Heaven is saying, you don't understand what that means.
Yeah.
You don't know what it means to rule. You have an upside down because you study people who are hungry for power in the world and lord over people. You don't get what we're talking about. So it means becoming wise, which wisdom is living your life by the right principles. That's reigning with Christ, is living your life by the right principles and performing a useful function. And the two are inextricably connected. If you're living a good life, you want to be useful to people. Yeah. That's what you mean. You mean the guy that is like is working at Wawa, and he's like making the sandwiches there or something. If he is looking to God and trying to live a good life, kind to the people that he lives with, and tries to do his job well, that guy's reigning with Christ.
Yeah.
That's reigning. That's sitting on the throne, right. And it's both like a happiness you get now, but also that's building heaven inside you. And when you come into the afterlife, you feel that heaven. I mean, like nobody said that. That's crazy.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I can remember, I was privileged to be a hockey chaplain, and 1 year the team I was chaplain of made the Frozen Four for their particular division. It was out in Michigan, your hometown, Curtis, out in East Lansing, Michigan. Woohoo!
Let's go.
So we drove out there, and then I'm driving back, and it's like I have to preach in the morning. They lost in the semifinals Saturday afternoon, so I'm driving through the night. I hit the Turnpike interchange. This is back when they had toll people running the toll booths.
I remember.
Remember that?
Back in my day.
Back in the day. And anyhow, so I pull up to this guy, and I'm chatting with him, and there's nobody around. It's like 2:30 in the morning, 2:30 in the morning. Give him my little ticket, give him my money, and we're just chatting it up. And then he passes me his, my change, and he goes, "Sir, this job really takes a toll on you." And it was like, and then he started laughing. And I thought, he's been waiting all night. He's been waiting all night. He's going to go home. He's going to tell his wife, "Honey, I had 3 tonight."
Yeah.
And I just saw, like, this is a guy who just, as simple as a job is of being a toll taker, he was finding joy in that job. And it was through humor and connection with people. I mean, it made my night, to have this little 2 a.m. conversation with
You're
the guy.
still thinking about that?
I'm still thinking about it.
How many years ago was that? 10 years ago?
Yeah. 8, 9, 10 years, something like that.
Reigning with Christ. Okay, so kingdom of useful. The Christ's kingdom, which is heaven, is a kingdom of useful functions. So that's a very Swedenborgian thing. So what is heaven? Heaven is useful functions. So I guess each countries have their character, right? They have their laws that kind of shape the type of people and life that people live there. So with the kingdom of God, country of God is like about being useful. It's a kingdom of useful functions. Swedenborg says that the closest model you'll come across to it is the human body.
Yeah.
If you look inside the body, everything there is doing some function. It's all somehow contributing to the whole of the body. That's what it's doing day in and day out. What is good is being useful. Okay, I'm just saying that angel is dropping a bunch of hits.
Yeah.
Okay, so then it goes on, because the Lord does good and useful things indirectly, here through angels and in the world through people. Oh, by the way, that toll guy, that was the Lord
Right.
using him to do that to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
He gives those who are performing useful functions a love for being useful, and also a reward for being useful, which is inner bliss. And this inner bliss is eternal happiness. So that's okay. What are you trying to do in life? What are your goals? What are your aspirations? You can have sort of your like, okay, here's where I want to try to be externally, and that's great. But there's a limit to what that does for you, and when you die, that stuff goes away.
Right.
However, the cultivating a love for usefulness in your life, that's like a retirement investment.
Right.
Like you're the more that, and you don't think about that, like, oh, I got to try to learn to focus on and love being useful more and more. As you do that, God like can connect with you more and makes you love it more. It's like it's an acquired. It's like you have to train to love being useful, because it doesn't come naturally. What comes naturally is you love sensory gratification and power and prestige and being right. You love all the things of the ego. That's what you. But I enjoy this. Like I want to try to do this to be helpful to these people. That's something. But if you start investing your time and energy into that, then that not only gets better in the world, but actually that's the God making heaven in you. So then when you come into the afterlife, you're in heaven.
Yeah, I was thinking about this very thing last night. So we all have tasks we like to do around the Christmas season, tasks we don't like to do. And one of the ones I dislike doing is putting lights on trees. I don't like it. It's just not my thing.
Ebenezer Scrooge.
Ebenezer Scrooge.
No, listen. It's a little something about, it's like prickly.
It's prickly.
And you're like, and it's awkward. You're like trying to hand it around.
What do you do with the bird? Anyhow, like it's all these things, right? And so like that whole idea of practicing it, I love the idea that and I had to remind myself of this. Like this was my practice last night. I'm not going to put the lights on the tree because I love putting the lights on the tree. I'm going to love putting the lights on the tree because I love my wife. And she has asked me to do that.
Yeah.
And that's how I'm going to be useful. So I'm not, the task itself, sometimes I like doing stuff, sometimes I don't, but it doesn't matter. The greater love is that I love my wife and she's asked me to do it. That's helpful to her. And it's a little of the difference between, I think, and this is courtesy of Shada Sullivan, Reverend Shada Sullivan, is the idea in life, like we get into counting our blessings. These are all the things I have, which is nice, right, to look at that. But really with being useful, it's about, instead of just counting the blessings, it's about being the blessing.
Yeah.
And being it really humbly. Like it's just really, what's the humblest way I can enter this? And it means entering it without your agenda, without trying to correct people, without trying to be the right one or the savior or anything like that. You enter it softly, and then, the Lord will start to work with you because you're in, as you said, you're in that practice. And with that practice, the Lord's going to find that space to fill.
That's awesome. So let's linger for a moment on, I want to put these Christmas lights up, not because I love putting the Christmas lights up, but because I love my wife and I want to, she would be happy. Those are like, this is good for her. She likes having these Christmas lights up. So in that moment, Swedenborg makes this fascinating claim that like loving the Lord is loving to do what is good. Mm-hmm. So like in that moment, you're like, I'm going to do this for my wife because she's a human being. And like a step back from that is like, you don't even think about it, but you're doing it for the Lord.
Right.
Because the Lord is goodness. So like, what does the Lord want for Christmas is everyone to be made as happy as they can possibly be. So for you to say, I'm doing this for my wife, the unspoken thing is like, because people should do what's good for each other. And that's like the Lord. But then at the same time, the idea that you are saying, I'm going to go beyond myself and do something that I think is useful and good. That's the Lord like doing that through you. So you're building up that you're getting something for yourself, even though you're not thinking about it, which is a love of doing that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. There's a lot going on there.
There's a lot. And I was thinking of there's this beautiful passage that Swedenborg offers. It's, I think, pretty revolutionary for people in relationships with his love is feeling the joy of another as if it was your own joy.
Yeah.
So I get to experience the joy of my wife seeing a beautiful Christmas tree, and I get to see her happiness, and that joy that she has, I can feel that joy. Again, doesn't mean that I love the thing, but I love that they love it. I love that it matters to them. And the more I can practice that, I think that is so much of what angels are, because your ego, my ego will never want to do lights. I can't picture ever wanting to do lights.
It's a Grinch, man.
It's a Grinch. Come on.
So, and it's what something I feel like that Swedenborg does is it gives you sort of tactical insight into the different natures of the joy that you can experience. Because where we are in the world, you can't really tell them apart. It's like the sun and the moon look like they're the same size. They look exactly the same size. I read this, but this is some amazing coincidence, because even though the sun is so much bigger than the moon, but it's so far away that you can't tell, right?
Yeah.
They look to observer. So the joy that you would get from, instead, I don't want to do this Christmas tree lights stuff. I want to go and just look at my phone.
Yeah.
That's a kind of, they're both they both feel there's the same dopamine, I'm happy. Look at that. I've helped out this person that I love, and she's happy about that. Same dopamine, right?
Yeah.
Same dopamine. But Swedenborg is saying look, one of these things is 1 billion times bigger than the other, and you don't realize it because it's about where they'll go. And this is the whole thing of your phone, you're going to scroll it and dopamine it. It'll get worse and worse. You're never going to be happy from it. You'll be more and more addicted. You'll get smaller and smaller rewards from it. It doesn't go anywhere. Learning how to feel the joy in others is joy in your own. That will grow forever and get better forever. So the Swedenborg equips us to make an informed choice about what we're doing.
I love the point too, where from Swedenborgian thought, it's always this mixture, right? We always have the ego, we always have the lower self and the higher self. We're going to have those in this life. And just even Curtis, just that acknowledgement of that, I'm always going to struggle with this stuff. I'm always going to. Even going down to St. Francis Inn, every time I go down there, I know 100% of the time it's going to be a great experience. But there's always that point in my brain that goes, you know what? I'd rather just be at home on my phone. This is a hassle.
Yeah.
But I know enough to work through that. And I think that's spiritual growth from a Swedenborgian perspective. You know enough to work through it. You know enough to just keep on moving. You to know that there's those thoughts that come in, there's those worries, blah, 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 all that crap that comes in.
Yeah.
And we just let it go, keep on moving. And that's where I think he gets towards compulsion being a different form of freedom, that freedom and compulsion actually can go together in our search for joy and our search for heaven.
And ego will get more of what it wants when you're in the state of heaven.
Yeah.
The ego doesn't know how to drive you. It doesn't know what it wants. It doesn't know where it's going. It doesn't realize that the life it's trying to get you to live will end up making you miserable as well, and it will be eternally frustrated. But when heaven is in charge in you, it's just like it said in the beginning. There's still feasts and stuff. You still get what your ego wants, but it's not. It's a passenger rather than a driver. There's always an outer self, as Swedenborg would put it, but that thing actually will have a better life if we're living the life of heaven than it would have if we were trying to follow it and live the life that's called hell.
Well, I wonder this, and it's just, I think you probably take this analogy too far, but with the banquet parts and these idea of paradises, it becomes less about what we see and more about who we're with.
Mm-hmm.
The personal side of it. A good meal for me, great food is fine, but I don't want to have would you go out to a fancy meal by yourself?
I was in California, and I was in a very beautiful place there, but my family wasn't there, and I was just there for work. And I remember I was walking on this beach, and there's the bluffs and everything, and I was like, I don't know how to taste this. There's nothing. I don't know. I'm not showing this to anyone. I don't live here. I don't know what this. I really can't do anything with this.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can tell it's great, but I don't have anyone to share this moment with. It's just, it doesn't really taste like anything to me.
Yeah.
So it is what it is. Let's finish this up. Where were we? So the inner bliss is eternal happiness. Okay, now the angel is telling these people who think heaven is power. Here's what the heavenly perspective on power is. As there is on earth, in heaven as well, there is great power and tremendous wealth. There are governments and governmental responsibilities. Therefore, there are positions, even in heaven, of greater and lesser power and status. The people who occupy these top positions, though, are selected from among those whose hearts are devoted to the well-being of all, and who are not affected beyond their bodily senses by the grandeur and magnificence that surrounds them in order to establish authority. So people in heaven, there's people who have, the only people that get to be that level are people who don't really care about having that.
Right.
They just care about the job, and that stuff is like, all right, it's there if it helps people focus on me and listen to me. It's about the job. Because it is crucial to the well-being of all that each person has some function in the community, and the community is in effect a body of the whole, and because all usefulness comes from the Lord and is carried out through the agency of angels and people as if they were acting on their own, clearly this is what it means to reign with the Lord. Upon hearing this statement from heaven, the supposed kings and princes came down from their thrones and seats and laid down their scepters, crowns, and mantles. The dense fog that held their aura of fantasy receded from them, and a bright cloud enveloped them that held an aura of wisdom, and it restored their minds to sanity.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I was smiling thinking about that. Do you really want to be totally in charge? Do you really want that? I mean, when you just think we can look at all the trappings and we look at how great it would be to be in charge of something, completely. But would we really want that? I mean, even if we had that power, would you really want that power? And I think probably for most of us, in theory, that sounds great. But the reality is leadership positions are really hard. And I'm right. Kind of like looking forward to not being in leadership position.
If you have a leadership position and it's not hard or stressful for you, that probably means you're doing a bad job. Because it's if you're not, like, if you're just like, this is fun, and you're not overwhelmed by the gravity and responsibility of that, knowing that you're affecting a bunch of people's lives, you're probably not the right person for the job. There is no like, oh yeah, this is so great, this is an easy life. Like that's not the one you would want.
Not it.
So heaven is beautiful. There's this, with the report we're reading right here, it's like heaven is this incredibly gorgeous place, but it doesn't matter. Like the beauty of heaven will do nothing for you unless you have heaven inside yourself. And this third group of people that had the wrong idea about heaven, they got set straight. You're going to see that just, it blows away. It dissipates in the wind if you think that that's what heaven is. And it really, this group who came out and said that heavenly happiness is like being in a paradise or like a great surroundings. It's like the leisure is heaven impulse in us, that you think, what would, if I could be as happy as I could possibly be, I'd never have to work again. That's what I never have any responsibilities. I just get to relax all the time. Wait, I'm going to start wanting to do this. Okay, focus. If I just relax all the time, that's what heaven is. So this is from True Christianity 732. This is the third group. The conclusion of our group, as people who got together and said this is what our heaven would be, is that heavenly joys are the joys of a garden paradise. Surely heaven is a garden paradise that extends all the way from the east to the west and from the south to the north. In it there are fruit trees and gorgeous flowers. At the center of them all there stands a magnificent tree of life from the book of Revelation. The blessed will sit by this tree and eat exquisitely flavorful fruit and wear wonderfully fragrant garlands of flowers. And because the warmth of spring is everlasting there, the minds of the blessed too are continually being renewed and cannot help coming upon new joys every day and drinking them in. So we've got perfect climate, beautiful surroundings, great things to eat and drink. That's all you do every day. That's got to be heaven. So this is what happened to that group. They got what they wanted. The angel led them through a tall gateway made of interwoven shoots and branches from excellent species of trees. Beyond the entrance, he led them along a meandering path from one area to another. This was in fact a garden paradise at the first point of entry to heaven. So this really was a place in heaven, but it's not the core of heaven. But we're going to do this. The group that was led along by the angel then saw a huge crowd of people, both male and female, of all ages. They were in groups of 3 here, 3 there, 10 here, 10 there. Some groups were sitting among rose gardens, weaving garlands for the heads of the older people and the arms of the young, braiding flower sashes to go around the children's chests. Other groups were making fruit juice, squeezing grapes, cherries, and berries into cups, and enjoying sipping from them. Other groups were inhaling the air, which was redolent with the fragrances of flowers, fruits, and sweet-smelling leaves. Some groups were singing, caressing the ears of their listeners with beautiful songs. Some groups were sitting by fountains, making different patterns with the water that was squirting in the air. Other groups were going into gazebos to lie around on couches. They were all enjoying these and many other paradisal pastimes. So it's like Sandals, Jamaica. It's just like there's look at this. We got this great resort. Everyone's lounging around. This has got to be heaven. After the angel's group had seen all this, he brought them along a path that wound here and there until finally he stopped next to a group of people sitting in a gorgeous rose garden, bordered by olive trees, orange trees, and lemon trees. The people were rocking back and forth, holding their heads in their hands, grief-stricken and weeping. Wait a second. Okay, so we got some people that are there. They're in this great paradise. They get to go live their idea of heaven. And how are you doing? I'm crying. The people in the angels group greeted them and asked, "What's wrong?" "It has been 7 days now," they replied, "since we arrived in this paradise. When we first arrived, we felt as though our minds had been lifted into heaven itself and we had gained access to inmost joys and pleasures." So it really does feel great. It's not that these things can't feel great, it's the duration. Can you build a happy life on this? After 3 days, though, the fun began to wear off. These things became less and less pleasant to our minds. We eventually became numb to them and found no pleasure in them at all. When things that we had thought would be such joys became no fun anymore, we started to fear that we were losing every delight of our life. We began to doubt that there even was such a thing as eternal happiness. That's interesting. So then we began wandering along the pathways and through different areas looking for that gateway through which we had come in. We look around at all the olives, grapes, oranges, and lemons, but the more we look at them, the more tired we get of everything we can see with our eyes, smell with our noses, and taste with our tongues. So I think something that's interesting there is so there's all these different kinds of joys in life. There's the joy of seeing beautiful things and being around luxury and in a place where you don't have any responsibilities. But after people, if they lean too hard on those, this is what heaven is, I'm gonna do it all the time, every day, and they start to the shine is wearing off, this is becoming normal, and then they're worried are we ever gonna be happy? Because the thing we thought would make us the greatest happy, it's giving out so fast. Are we going to go into this sort of zombie state of nothing's really fun anymore?
Yeah. What was striking to me was where they said after 3 days the fun began to wear off. That's so true, right? We think, I could just do this forever, but really, 3 days these people, that's not that long. Yeah. 3 days these people are just enough of this, and I think it's that way with vacation, right? It's a little like thinking, if life was just a permanent vacation, which is nice to think, but not really what life is about. God didn't put us on this earth to have a vacation, for 52 weeks a year. That's not the point.
There's my father-in-law is we go sometimes with them on this vacation to the beach. It's really great. But I heard him talking about by the end of it, the last few days, he's like, I need to be back.
Yeah.
I need to be working on stuff.
Yeah.
Because there is it's not saying, and none of this is saying going to a vacation isn't great.
Yeah.
And not that you don't have to have that. You can't just work all the time, and do it. But it's the combination of a life that's based in usefulness. Then the vacation can do what it wants to do, what it's supposed to do, which is give you this break, give you a little time to, you don't have any worries. You're resting. You're just enjoying simple things in life. That with the underpinning of, this is just a short departure from the thing that I do to make the human race better. That's the right combination. It's just it's like salt. It's like salt on food. It's like a little bit. This is so great. You too much is very quickly. I don't want to put this in my mouth. Yeah.
Well, I was thinking too. There's ways. Again, this gets back to the idea. What are the hacks to do this, like in our lives? And thinking, have a great vacation. By all means, like we should all have wonderful vacations. But if we think about it more from like, how can I find pleasure? How can I find the next thrill? To how can I be more connected with the people I'm with? Just finding those little differences. Not, oh, what's the next fun thing I can do that'll be entertaining? How can I connect with someone? Like my mom on vacation, one of the things she did religiously, and there's 5 of us in my family, was she would take each of us out to breakfast, when we were little kids. Each of us got breakfast with mom one day. That's being useful. That's that beautiful combination of both recreation, vacation, and usefulness all coming together in one.
That's great. That's a fun thing for her to do.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I've been on vacation and like in the ocean swimming, and I don't know what to do with my mind. Like, I'm like, what am I like? Yeah. How do I? But if I think of like, oh yeah, like if I think about myself as the guy that does the jobs that I do, and I think, okay, well, Curtis would need this to recharge. Like that's what we're doing here. Is we're gonna getting him back so that he can go and do that. Like gives you a focus, makes you enjoy it more.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's what they learned. The angel with the visiting group said to them, "This labyrinth of a garden paradise is actually just an entrance on the outskirts of heaven. I know the way and I'll take you there." At this, the people sitting on the ground jumped up and gave the angel a hug. They joined the angel and his group. As they walked along, the angel taught them what heavenly joy and eternal happiness really are. Again, both our group were with, and then this group who had been in there, both had this false idea of heaven, but now that they've seen it's not really good, they got in this receptive state where they're eager for information about the truth, which before that, they wouldn't have heard it because it's just like, no, you're wrong. Going into that permanent vacation is happiness. But now it's like, okay, well, what really is happiness?
Yeah.
They are not, in fact, the external pleasures of paradise, he said, unless the internal pleasures of paradise are felt at the same time. External pleasures of paradise are just things that delight our bodily senses. Internal pleasures of paradise are things that satisfy the desires of our soul. If these inner pleasures are not present within these outer pleasures, the outer pleasures have no heavenly life because they have no soul. Every delight that is lacking its corresponding soul fades and wears out over time. Eventually, it fatigues the mind more than work does. And it's harder to... Okay, so it has a soul. Food, why is food fun to do? Because food makes your body continue to function. That's the soul of the joy and of the food. That's why everything is like that. Why do you enjoy these things? Because they tend back toward usefulness. All throughout the heavens, there are garden paradises, which are a source of great joy to the angels. The more of the soul's delight the angels have, the more truly joyful these joys become to them. At that point, they all asked, what is the soul's delight? Where does it come from? Yeah, I would want to know. Yeah. What's the soul's delight? Where does it come from? The soul's delight, the angel answered, comes from love and wisdom from the Lord. Love is what produces this delight, and wisdom is how it produces it. Both love and wisdom find a home in the effect they have, and that effect is usefulness. This delight flows from the Lord into our soul and comes down through the higher and lower levels of our mind into all our bodily senses and finds its fulfillment in them. This is what makes a joy joyful and also makes it everlasting, because it comes from the eternal source. You have now seen the features of a heavenly garden paradise, and I tell you the truth, there is not a single thing there, not even the littlest leaf, that does not come from the marriage of love and wisdom and usefulness. Therefore, if we have that marriage within ourselves, then we are in a heavenly paradise, and therefore in heaven itself.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Chris. And I love the idea, too, where Swedenborg uses the analogy of a labyrinth. And when you look at labyrinths are such a beautiful spiritual tool. And, I would tell those of you who are listening or online right now, like just Google the Chartres, Labyrinth at Chartres Cathedral. And it so fits in perfectly with this particular memorable relation, because you come into the labyrinth and it looks like you get this pass right into the middle, right into the core. You're trying to get to the core, to get home.
Yeah, right. To win.
Feels like, you feel like you get right there.
Yeah.
But then you realize, oh no, it's actually this winding. And there's a time where actually, this is kind of crazy, where somebody who's at the furthest ring is actually closer to home than the person who appears to be right beside it, because they just started their journey. And I think of that like a false heaven, right? We go rushing like, oh, this will be it. And the Lord's like, yeah, might be parts of it, but there's going to be this journey to help you discover what real joy is. And that idea of a labyrinth, like the difference between a labyrinth and a maze, which I just love this idea. Yeah. The difference between a labyrinth and a maze is a labyrinth has no dead ends. And a maze does. Like, God's not setting up this maze for sort of like when we put the little rats here and we're trying to find the cheese.
Yeah,
right. That's not at all. It's this path, and we get to try this. But part of divine providence was that we would try this, and that the Lord's just going to keep on guiding us and guiding us and guiding us and getting us home that way.
Yeah, man. No dead ends.
No dead ends.
So everything in your life is there for some kind of use. Yeah. So this is part of your journey to heaven. Yeah. That's cool. Yeah. I like that. The marriage within itself. One of the fascinating things about the way that heaven is, the way that the spiritual world works, according to Swedenborg, is everything there reflects an inner state. So it reflects like what's in your heart and mind. So all this stuff, people kind of think, oh yeah, heaven is beautiful. There's all kinds of beautiful stuff going on. But why is it beautiful? Like what makes the stuff there beautiful? I mean, in the world, you can go out into the woods near a house, and there's a reason why the woods there are like they are. If you're way up in the northern latitudes, the woods is going to have a certain kind of tree. It's going to be conifers. They're going to be slow growing, and that's because that's how the environment is. Yeah, that's what makes it like it is. If you're down in the tropics or like the subtropics, there's going to be palm trees and there's going to be dense vegetation, and it has to do with why in heaven is all the beautiful stuff there. It's because it's not just like that's God spent more money on it or something. It's because in heaven, the surroundings reflect not climactic conditions, but psychological conditions. So that if there's people that love, that have the internal things in them that is beautiful, if people have love and humility and justice and fairness in their hearts, that shows itself in the surroundings through how things look around them. It's like projected around them. Yeah. It's like their aura comes out of them. And so everything in heaven that's beautiful is only there and only takes the form it does because it's reflecting what's really beautiful, which is what goes on in your heart when the Lord's in there, when heaven's in there, when a love for the human race is what's driving you. So to try to take the external stuff, like just the sights and sounds and just like the beauty effects of it, and not the soul at the same time, which is a love of doing what's good for other people, you just like, it's like you're stripping, you're separating it and making it fake.
Yeah. Well, the soul of beauty is so powerful, right? Like both of us are blessed with children, and I'm sure Sydney's a very accomplished artist, but like if you took it beside a Rembrandt, right, and you put a piece of her artwork beside a Rembrandt, well, which one's more beautiful? Well, the fact is, to you, guess what?
I was at a concert, like a school concert, where it was like the school orchestra, and they're all playing together, and I was just struck by. It was so like the music was going, and now it's time for all the kids on their stringed instruments. It sounded like a horror movie, like because in a horror movie it's like and discordant, and that's kind of how it's like. They were all trying their best, but it was just hilarious. Like they're little, they don't know how to do it right. So it's like objectively it didn't sound like it was supposed to, but everybody there loved it. Yeah, everybody there was just like. They had stars in their eyes. Look at all the parents were just like, "This is so great. That's so cute. That's so good." Yeah. I think they loved it more than they're gonna go hear the Philadelphia harmonic something Philharmonic something whatever, because the goodness that's inside of it.
Mm-hmm. That's the soul of beauty, right? And it's fascinating the way the soul of beauty can kind of create the world that we live in. Yeah. And in heaven, it literally does that, and in our world, pretty close, to creating the world that we live in.
So that's what they learned when they thought like, okay, it's leisure and it's beauty and surroundings. That's not heaven. Yeah. And there's one last one they want to get to, which I think is especially, it's way different than all the other ones. Yeah. But it is what some people's idea of what heaven is, maybe even what happiness is. Some people think that it's church. Yeah. It's religion. That heaven is continually worshiping God. That's the most joyful thing you can have. That's what heaven is. It's sort of like you have this stuff in the world where you go and do all these things. Wipe that slate clean. We get into the afterlife. You're like praising all the time. And that's what heaven is. Isn't that what Jesus says it's going to be in some way or something? So what happens when people who think that's heaven, when they get into heaven? Yeah. What's it like? So This is the last group we'll talk about today. This said, the joy of heaven and the eternal happiness that goes with it come from perpetually glorifying God in a celebration that goes on forever. And blissful worship with songs and shouting is a constant lifting of the heart toward God, with complete trust that he accepts our prayers and praise because we experience his divine showering of abundant blessings upon us. So that's what they believe heaven is, and this is the experience that they get. The angel led them to a small town with a church building in the middle of it. All the houses there were referred to as sacred buildings. In that town, the group saw crowds of people coming in from the territory surrounding it on every side. In among the crowd, there were a number of priests greeting and welcoming people and leading them by the hand to the gateways of the church and through them to several of the buildings surrounding the church. They introduced the people to the everlasting worship of God. The priest said, "It is a rule, both here and there, that you first have to come into this church building and spend 3 days and nights here. After this period of initiation, you will walk around to the other houses in this town. Along with the rest of the congregations there, you will pray, shout, and have sermons read to you. Take great care that you do not think anything within yourselves or say anything to anyone else that is not holy, devout, and religious." So I was like, we're worshiping all the time. Don't even think, like, get rid of the secular stuff in life.
Yeah.
This is just, it's church all the way up and down. Welcome to heaven. Then the angel led his group to the church building. It was packed beyond capacity. There were many people there who had been of high rank and position in the world, and also many who had been ordinary people. There were groups of guards posted at each entrance to the church to prevent anyone from leaving before the 3 days had passed. It's like, hey, no going halfway. You said it's worship all. Let's see what that's like. Today is the second day since these people came in, said the angel. Look at them carefully, and you will see how they are glorifying God. The angel's group looked around. They saw that many of the worshipers were fast asleep.
And again, there's a little humor in that, right?
Yeah.
Like, want to see how they glorify God? They're sleeping.
Yeah, I think Swedenborg is writing these like in a sort of sensationalist way. Like they're trying to be attention-grabbing, comedic, to highlight some of the absurdity of these positions. The people who were still awake were yawning and yawning because they were constantly lifting their thought toward God and never allowing those thoughts to come back down into their bodies. Some of them had the feeling that they were faces disconnected from their bodies. Interesting. They're like thinking up in there, not hands-on. So it's like, and that was also how they appeared from the outside. That's weird. Some of them, whose eyes were rolled back into their heads as a result of looking upward all the time, looked insane. Briefly put, the hearts of all were depressed and their spirits were fatigued with boredom. They turned away from the pulpit and began shouting, "Our ears are going deaf. Stop preaching. We're not listening to you anymore. The sound of your voice is making us sick." A tough crowd.
Yeah.
They stood up and rushed en masse toward the doors, broke them open, pushed up against the guards, and shoved them out of the way. The priests pursued them and clung on to them, teaching and teaching, praying and sighing. They were saying, "Celebrate the festival, glorify God, sanctify yourselves." So, doesn't seem like it's working.
No. And I think, one of the things I was thinking, looking at this, is I think a lot of the time, right, when we, it's interesting, right, when we believe that heaven is going to be all about church and all about religion, and that's a 24/7 thing, my ego gets in there and thinks, oh, it's all about my church.
Yeah.
It's all about my religion. Actually, I have the special place where everybody can go and it'll be packed because we all get it.
Yes.
But it's funny how actually divisive that is. It's sort of setting up that there's those who get it, those who don't. Here are the holy people, and the holy people are somehow separated from everyone else.
Yeah.
I think that can be ego can get in there really quickly.
And there's a fundamental misconception about what worship is.
Right.
People think, well, the substance of worshiping God is like looking up and thinking about God and doing these, being in a church building. That's how you do it. That doesn't make any sense. Like, so why if that's what human beings were made to do? Why are you going to bother with opposable thumbs? Yeah. Why do we need opposable thumbs? You didn't have them. Can't you just raise your hands up and worship God? Why do you even need like knees and legs?
Yeah.
Like, why all this complexity?
Yeah.
Why have life have all it is? Why have like, the cells doing what they do, the like progression of seed to plant to, if get rid of all that. That's unnecessary if it's just about sitting here and praising God.
Right. Well, I was thinking with New Church Live, when we started, there was a man who got involved with our church and actually just did his granddaughter's baptism a couple weeks ago, now I think about it. And I asked him what he liked about the new church, and he said, "Oh, it's sea-level Christianity." And I thought, sea-level, what's he talking about? He said sea-level, S-E-E, like you can see it. It's, and I think that's what real faith is. Real faith is, it does have sometimes where we're looking up, but nothing grows on mountaintops. Things grow in the valley. It's this sea level. It's this base level where we really can find faith, faith sort of coming alive.
It's the same principle of all these, which is saying none of these things are something you can build a life on. Back in the beginning, it was hedonistic pleasure. Then there's the power and glory. There's the leisure, and now worship. None of these things can be the core of a happy life.
Yeah.
They can all play a role. Like you can have your, the responsibility you have in wherever your job is and importance or something. That can be a part of it. Going and having good meals or having vacations, like those can be a part of it. But that's not what life is. They're little slices of life. They're not the core of life. Same thing with religion, with the trappings of religion. You can have as an essential and happy part of your life that you have somewhere when you go and you do religious rituals, and maybe you're praying and singing songs or whatever you're doing. That can be, and it can be an important part of getting you to think about God and develop your concept of God and develop your concept of what it is to live a good life, a reminder and all that. But that's not that's always, it serves your life. It can't be your life.
Yeah.
If you try to make it your life, then it will fall apart just like this.
Yeah.
And again, that's not what Jesus Christ was doing. How he there's like a little bit of time when he was in the temples. There's some times when he was delivering sermons, sure, but that's not like the bulk of it. He didn't just do that all the time. He didn't sit there and see. If this was really how it was, wouldn't he have just hunkered down in a temple somewhere and just started praising God, and it would have been a 33-year praising God.
Yeah.
But he was out walking around, talking to people, doing things, and up until his ministry, he was like a carpenter. So he's up there building people's houses. So that's not what life is. Why? What I was trying to get at before with like we wouldn't need opposable thumbs and look at how life is.
Yeah.
God made life. The mind that we're trying to fathom made life how it is.
Yeah.
If it was meant to be just like a worshiping thing, and by worship we mean like the activities you get prescribed in church, why is life so full of this complexity? What's that all about?
Yeah.
And if it was just about hedonistic pleasure, then why is there this built-in need to work to sustain life?
Yeah.
Why is that even there?
Yeah.
Look at how life is. That's a clue, because this is God's copyrighted on this stuff. So the answer has to be something that's consistent with what life is. This is why I love what we're learning here, which is that all these things are only slices of the main thing, which is a life of productive, useful service, which is reflected in, the way that every organ in your body, that's what it's doing, productive, useful service. This is the way human society is run. It's what most people spend most of their time doing, is doing something productive. That's where heaven is.
And isn't it funny, right? That eternity's right there. Like we live these things, and we live as heaven, as God would have us live. We find eternity. Like eternity's not found in the paradise. Eternity's not found in just leisure. Eternity's not found in just worship. Those are events, but it's not the flow of life. And one of my favorite quotes about prayer was Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel was marching with Martin Luther King in Selma, Alabama, and somebody asked if he was praying, and he said, "My legs were praying." Mm-hmm. I love that idea, right? Like my legs were praying. That's our life should be a prayer. I think there's one, Kirsten, you probably are better able to quote it than I am, but where Swedenborg says, "What else is a life of worship but a life of kindness?"
Yep. And those who live a life of kindness are at prayer all the time. If not with their mouths, then with their hearts.
There you go. There you go. Could you say that one more time?
Well, sure. I'll just make it up. But it's something like people who live a life of kindness are praying all the time. if not with their mouth, then with their hearts.
Yeah, yeah.
And I do think that this may seem like we're just being trite and like it would be nice on a Hallmark card. But this is deadly serious. This is the Swedenborg said the thing that killed the Christian church was the separation of faith and love.
Yeah.
That separating those things out and saying, well, what's the barometer for whether or not you're a Christian? Going and doing this worship stuff, confessing with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, or whatever they would say. That's what makes you a Christian. This other, like the love your neighbor or repent and shun it, like that's somewhere in there, but it's not the main thing. Doing that destroys everything because you are fundamentally misunderstanding who God is and what God wants.
Yeah.
You don't have the marching orders right. So when Jesus says, I feel like I'm bringing this up every podcast now, but when Jesus says to Peter, do you love me? Feed my sheep. He says that 3 times. You have to understand who God is and what God wants if you're going to try to follow God, and that God is fundamentally interested in the living of a good life. He would not, if he was looking down and saw you, oh, look at this, you're worshiping me all the time. I don't care about that.
Yeah.
I don't need you to do that.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm asking you to do. And what good does that do?
Yeah.
What good does that do for anyone? The thing that needs to be happening is here's the world and it's full of people. It's not where it should be. We need to get it good. You do the work inside yourself to become good. That's the work I'm interested in. And we do the work then to go help the human race to help it be good. That's what I'm interested in. You got to have that right or you don't know anything.
Yeah. I love the way you're saying that. And the work will bring you joy.
Yeah.
The work actually will, over time, will bring you joy. It's not like this big laborious process. It's not, oh, I have to. It's that you get to. Like, we get to make a difference in the world. You today get to make a difference in somebody's life. Everybody who's listening to this today, you get to make a difference in someone's life. And maybe have a nice glass of wine, maybe have a prayer or two. Like, those things are great too. But the most important thing is you get to make a difference today. And how good is that?
Yeah. Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And that thing you were just saying there, you get to make the difference, to understand that is the precious, the jewel. Mm. That's wisdom. Yeah. We don't get that when you're born. So when you're without form and void, and you're in your ego, you don't understand that matters. Yeah. That doesn't shine more brightly than the other stuff that's on the menu in front of you. But like the wisdom of the whole word is to show you that's what matters.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. This is how it finishes. At that moment, 4 men appeared, dressed in shining white. One of them had been an archbishop in the world. The other 3 had been bishops. They had since become angels. They called the priests together. After greeting them, they said, "We have been watching from heaven how you interact with these sheep. You have been feeding and feeding and feeding them to the point where they are having a mental breakdown. You evidently don't know what it means to glorify God. It means bearing the fruits of love. That is, performing our work faithfully, honestly, and diligently. Doing this is loving God." Okay, let's just say that one more time. Performing our work faithfully, honestly, and diligently. That's loving God. Mm. That's a big deal.
And that's kind of coming back to that simple good. I think that's making that's pretty simple, right? Like it's not big and complex. It's not high drama.
Man,
it's just like, here we go.
I wish I could live like the other half lived, with the ability to do my work faithfully, honestly, and diligently. Is that something that is accessible to everyone? And is that something that does? I'll tell you, you don't really care if you're the person who lives next door to you or the person who sits across from you at work. You don't care if they go and pray for a long time on Sunday. Yeah. But if or the person you're calling for customer service, or something, if they do their work faithfully, honestly, and diligently, or the plumber that comes into your house, if they do their work faithfully, honestly, and diligently, you benefit from that and you love it. If you ask somebody, is like, can you come and tell me if my roof needs to get repaired or not? And if this person is like faithful, honest, and diligent, and gives you a true answer and gives you a fair price and does the work well, you can tell that that's good.
Yeah.
You know that's a good thing. And if there was any justice in the world, there would be a reward for doing that. And what we're saying is there is a reward, which is called heaven.
Yeah.
That's what heaven is.
It's interesting. That's exactly what I was scribbling a note here, and it's.
I just saw your note and I was like, I'm going to say that.
I'm taking that one. I'm taking that one.
Okay.
Mother Teresa famously said, like, the Lord never asks us to be successful. He asks us to be faithful. Mm-hmm. And we do these things, and it doesn't mean that we'll necessarily have financial ease or we'll have all this, that, and the other thing, all the bright, shiny pennies. But it does mean that we success in that way, but it does mean we'll just learn to live faithfully, like full of faith, there's a part where Swedenborg talks about sort of faith. He uses the example, faith is kind of like the eye of love. It's how you look out at the world. And that idea of that view, like it's getting that view. And then all of a sudden it doesn't become about a sense of outcomes. It just becomes, this is what the Lord's asking me to do. Will it be successful every time? No. But I'm still going to keep doing it because this is where true happiness, joy, and service lie. All of them coming together.
You see a picture of that in the way that Swedenborg was living his life as he was writing these things. Now, he was in the nobility and all that. He had some kind of stipend or inheritance or so. He wasn't having to worry about where his next meal would come from, which is something that a lot of us face in the world. But, however, over the course of writing these books, there was a lot of ups and downs with the success of the books, but even his own finances. There was a partway through his theological phase, there was a collapse of the currency in Sweden. There was like a super inflation or something. So suddenly his money went way less far and paper was way expensive. So he actually started making his books smaller. You see these little tiny books he published because he couldn't afford.
Wow.
Because he was trying to save money up, because he was selling his books. He was letting the printer keep any so he had limited finances to be able to do this. And yet he was just like, okay, well, even though he felt like this was an incredibly important, divinely ordained mission, he's like, well, I know God's providence is running things, and I'm going to try to just continue to do things faithfully, honestly, diligently. I'm sure he had a moment or two in his room of like, but what I'm saying is that he didn't like kick and scream, or wasn't like God gave him some kind of golden ticket. He's just like, all right, well, the work in front of me, regardless of my success levels, I'm going to do this faithfully, honestly, and diligently, continue to write these books, and look, here we're benefiting from that. Down the line, sure, there's results, and the results are great. I love the results when they go well, but even if they don't, you still can do your work faithfully, honestly, and diligently.
I was thinking, I love the idea of a lighthouse, right? And a lighthouse is just there, and it's light, and it helps ships to navigate. And that bit of where he says they're faithfully, honestly, diligently, like that's just being a lighthouse. That's all you're trying to be. Mm-hmm. And Anne Lamott has this wonderful quote where she said, no lighthouse saved anyone running around a beach. Yeah. It's not. It's just like, this is who I am. This is how I'm going to work on life. And it really does make a difference out there in the world. You mentioned somebody doing room. We love working with those kind of people. Like who doesn't, and we'll go back to them. Even if they're more expensive, we'll go back to them. Yeah. Because we know we know that kind of true blue-edness. Yeah. When we see it and when we experience it.
And if everyone did that, life would be pretty good.
Yeah.
So it is the glue. Doing this is loving God. Doing this is also loving our neighbor, performing our work faithfully, honestly, and diligently. It is the glue that holds society together, and it is what is best for the community. God is glorified by our doing this, and also by having our worship at particular times. Have you not read what the Lord said? My Father is glorified by this, that you bear much fruit, and you will be my disciples. The bishops then commanded the guards to open the doors and let everyone come in or go out as he or she wished, since there is a great multitude of people ignorant of the true nature of heaven, who cannot conceive of heavenly joy in any other form than perpetual worship of God. Okay, so you have this like corrective process that's going on, which is all these scenarios and simulations and everything that happen in heaven, is to get people to understand what heaven really is. Because that's important. And so the cool thing with us reading through is we can kind of learn what it is ahead of time. Yeah. And start to, you said live heaven. So now it seems like I know more about what it is to live heaven than we knew at the beginning of this.
Yeah. Yeah. And the idea that it's accessible, like live heaven now, like that's what we can do. We can live heaven now. We can practice it now. It's not about earning it or or some great reward system. I think our lives from a Christian New Church perspective, it's heaven all the way to heaven or hell all the way to hell. And we get to choose that. And when we live it that way, I think, I would just close on the idea that, the beautiful idea of the parable of the sower. Like, we're going to throw a lot of seeds, and some of them aren't going to land on good ground. They're going to land on these places where we thought this would bring us happiness, or we thought that would make a difference, or we thought this, thought that, and it won't. But then pay attention to where things really are growing, where it's like, oh yeah, this is that feeling that they were talking about. This is that feeling that Swedenborg was mentioning. This is what that joy really is. And the beautiful part is that our souls know it. Like, they just do. That's what intuition's all about.
Well, it makes me think of that quote, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and you will gain all.
Yeah.
Seek ye first. That song?
Yeah.
That's at the beginning of, I think, Secrets of Heaven. Swedenborg quotes that. It says,
really?
The translation I've seen is, seek first God's kingdom and its justice, and you will gain all. Of course, everybody wants to gain all, which is, you want to be happy. And in so many different ways. And you don't even know all the things that you want, but there's like wounds that you feel like you need to have healed, and knots you need to untangle, and your conceptions about the world and people. There's so much, like, we all have so much need. Seek first the kingdom of God, and you will gain all.
Yeah.
And how do you seek the kingdom of God? Performing our work faithfully, honestly, and diligently. Doing this is loving God.
Yeah.
So it's not saying, all right, you need to just head down and think small and that's it. It's like that. The thing you need to seek first is that the love of doing the work.
Yeah.
And then all these things will be added to you.
Yeah.
And knowing by all these things, I mean, whatever you need, and you don't even know what you need. God knows what you need. He's going to do what he needs to do as he needs to do it. You go and just, like, if you're willing, you don't have to. You can live your life a million other ways in this. You're not forced to. But if you want to follow the path that God of the universe is saying, this is the one that's going to lead you to heaven, just go and work faithfully, honestly, and diligently to do good, and then you'll gain all.
Well, and it's just this reminder again, like, it comes back to original blessing. Like, God creates the world, and he creates it good, very good. And in that bit of, like, this journey's good. Like, it has lots of days that are really hard, that are really difficult, that are really challenging, where we feel like we're as far away from heaven as we can possibly be. But the beautiful part is that God has it. God has our journey, as your journey, as my journey, as those people watching us online, is all of your journeys. And it just gets back to, like, taking a breath and just remembering, oh yeah, this is good. The work is good. Life is good.
Life is good, man.
Yeah.
Thank you for this conversation. A lot of fun hanging out with you. Everyone, thanks for watching. If you're not a member yet, click that little join button, as our members are what make this possible. So we'd love to see you show up there. Thanks for hanging out, everyone. Chuck, great talking to you. Go everybody, and live that heaven now.
There we go.